Hey YouTubers, Nicholas Matovich here with another YouTube video from Strasbourg 1991 Productions. Today I'm going to be doing a book review for one of my favorite books that I actually got from one of the Amazons. I was fortunate enough to use a coupon, which cost me under 20 bucks, which was under 25 bucks, which was amazing. This book is called East Broad Top Slim Gauge Survivor by Dean E. Melander. This is the book I've been telling you about the history of the East Broad Top Coal Mining Company, which began in 1874 to move coal from the fields in central Pennsylvania over to and from Mount Union. The books also explain some of the locomotive history, rolling stock, freight cars, passenger equipment, etc. It also gives you a few interesting footages. One of the footages that I've yet to see. This is actually one of the stations here in one of the coal hauling fields in Mount Union. This is where the northern terminus was actually located, where it now today resides as property of Norfolk Southern. But I do give this book a 10 out of 10 highballs. I mean, it was just incredible. I was like so blown away with nostalgia. I give it if you can't find a book other than this in better condition and better pricing. Frank Kuiper, who was a producer and historian for Green Frog Video Productions, actually did write a few books with Lee Rainey, and basically the whole railroad talks about why the railroad actually chose to build the operations with 3-foot track known as narrow gauge compared to standard gauge, which is 4 feet 8.5 inches apart. It was the cheapest form of construction at the time when the coal hauling fields out of Robertsdale, which is near the southern terminus of the railroad, actually began to negotiate trackage with Mount Union, which they were actually found a way because they could use narrow gauge trucks on standard gauge equipment, and they would basically swap out the standard gauge equipment with the narrow gauge trucks, which was surprisingly, and they changed them to standard gauge when they hit Mount Union on the main lines. So this was a very interesting book. I do recommend it to a friend or a colleague of mine. But the north end, as you actually can see here, this is East Broad Top locomotive number 15. This was actually one of 6 Mikados, 282 wheel arrangements, and the locomotives actually were built, had engines numbers 12 and then 14 through 18. Never had a 13 in the roster because it was just they would have to actually build a replica of number 12 in order to do that. But the locomotives, specifically in numerical order, were built in 1911, 1912, 1914, 1916, 1918, and 1920, which the 18 was built 102 years ago to the day, and it's one of the largest Mikados on the East Broad Top to ever be built, specifically for any part of the world on the East Coast, not the West Coast, but the East Coast. There was also some interesting factors of older steam locomotives that were scrapped, but they did have numbers. The 11 was a 262 Prairie, valve gear. Well, the valve gear on half of the Mikados was a indirect wall shirts, which you can actually look at your local library or for your local computers on history on running gear and how they were customized. The 16, 17, and 18 had southern valve gear, which I did not even know that most of the southern valve gear came from steam locomotives that were built specifically for the Southern Railroad, hence the name, which is in the whole total video with the Southern 630 and 722, which were built with that type of valve gear. But there was actually another railroad that actually built an indirect version of southern valve gear. The 26, a 262 for the Surrey, Sussex, and Southampton, and its sister number 6, a 260, actually had that specific arrangement of indirect southern valve gear. And for those who are not familiar with the direct and southern valve gear and the indirect southern valve gear, like the wall shirts, the direct valve gear, the direct Walshart's valve gear actually has where the crank actually works outside the wheels to inside the wheels, rather than indirect would actually be you would work it inside to outside the wheels, and it actually the crank goes over and under, not under and over. Locomotives like 1551 at the Ohio Central and 280 Consolidation 610 at TVRM, Tennessee Valley Railroad Museum, and a lot of its sisters from the U.S. Army Corps Transportation actually had those valve gears, including some Sioux Line Mikados also had that valve gear also. But case in point, back to the East Broad Top, one of my most favorite highlights is the unique collection of, if you can see here, so this is some of the passenger equipment, some of the combines, and parlor cars and parlor coaches that were later converted for observation platform use. The cars actually were built for a Kinzhou operation, not related to the Kinzhou Viaduct, which is in a total different video. But very interesting footage of some of the equipment they were used for World War II, which they would eventually scrap because they were worn out beyond the troop train service. But what I've actually been told, is that the East Broad Top, as of today, is trying to rebuild all of its 6 locomotives to operating condition and its rolling stock. And the southern portion of the line down to Alvin, unfortunately, the excursion trips to Mount Union we're not part of the deal, which is actually NS, and NS has its own trackage rights over that portion of the railroad. They do want to actually, the highest they can go up to is maybe Adams or Lucy's Furnace, but Lucy's Furnace is that's like a whole different direction from north of Mount Union, which they had standard gauge shunting service, yard goats with 060s, but it didn't work out well. Most likely what you're going to see today on the East Broad Top is the connection down to Alvin from Orbosonia, and then they're going to try to extend the line up to Shirleysburg and Pump Station, which is actually halfway between Ogwick and Shirleysburg and Colgate Grove, which they have a wide track to turn the trains around. Now, I do recommend this to any rail fans or any rail buff, but one of my most favorite parts of this book is they actually show, can't really show it here because it's a little awkward, they actually show the, actually have trips at Alvin, which the coal docks were actually located where the end of track was located, and they would also have the stations at Polk, Three Springs, and Saltillo, which I've actually been told that Saltillo Depot is actually being rebuilt for operating condition. Here's another footage of Orbosonia to Saltillo. They actually go over a beautiful, like a deck plate trestle, which actually spans over the Three Springs Creek, and they actually go over to Cole Summit, and they pass through Raising and Sidling Hill tunnels, which they begin to assault a very steep grade that you can't even use you would have to use at least 3 steam locomotives of the 12, 14, and 15 to actually assault that grade. You usually would use for like heavier motive power with more tractive effort because it can handle the grades a lot better. Just in closing note, the operations, they do actually plan to reopen the lines, and they have the steam locomotives in order, 16, 15, 14, and then maybe later on they can actually get the 18, the 17, and the 12 in that order to be fully restored to operating condition. That's it. I hope you hear more of my book reviews for Literary Gladiators. Thanks R.E. Schneider-Gans, Josh Caparelli, Zach Laws, etc. for giving me this opportunity for YouTube to actually explain my opinion of East Broad Top, Slim Gauge Survivor, which the coal traffic ended in 56, and passenger service ended in 1954, both in October. And 16 and 18 were both the last 2 engines to actually pull trains in those types of services until they were actually sidelined, and they actually had 4 locomotives, 12, 14, 15, 17 run until 2001. That's it. Hope to see you later. Bye.